Hey, hi, hello. We're online, and so are you. In an episode I'm wittily calling the question that everyone is answering: will AI be our downfall? I'm hoping I can dive into a little bit of where I'm currently sitting at with all the things flying around about AI nowadays. Because I think it's maybe a little bit cliched and over spoken about or talked about at the moment, but it has a very direct impact on our online lives, both professionally and personally. We interact with AI every day, sometimes without even realizing it. Think every time Netflix suggests a show, or your email filters spam, or your phone unlocks with your face, or even Google Map rerouting because of traffic. That's all already AI. And it's not the flashy robots taking over kind, but sort of a quiet background intelligence deciding what we see, what we click on, what we buy, and what we believe. So often I think maybe the question isn't will AI be our downfall, but rather has it already become so integrated that we don't even notice it anymore? I don't think AI will destroy us in a single dramatic event, and maybe I'm being naively optimistic about that, but I feel like it's more of a slow osmosis, even if it feels like it's going very quickly. But before we get into the future, I found it quite interesting to look a little bit into the past, and I think we're going to start there. So AI's roots actually go way back. In around 1950, Alan Turing proposed the Turing test, the idea that if a machine could hold a conversation indistinguishable from a human, that it could be considered intelligent. And the 1956 Dartmouth Conference coined the term artificial intelligence. That was we're talking 80 years ago now. And back then, computers filled rooms, and AI, and I put that in quotation marks, mostly meant teaching machines to play chess or solve logic puzzles. Nothing as threatening as the deepfakes and stuff that we see online today. But by the 1980s and the 1990s, these expert systems started creeping into industry, so things that helped doctors diagnose illnesses or banks assess credit risk and that kind of thing. But basically, AI's been around long before the word ChatGPT entered our vernacular and before it made the headlines. It's looked more like rules and algorithms than creativity and conversation, which is why we don't really associate it with something that happened 80 years ago. But most of us have used AI for decades already without knowing it. So I've mentioned some of them, but I mean like recommendation systems on YouTube, Spotify, or TikTok all had AI. Fraud detection from banks when your credit card froze and stuff, that's all already been using AI. Spam filters in Gmail, predictive text, your Siri and your Alexa, even camera autofocus uses AI to guess where your face is. It's basically been the internet's plumbing for a while. And I mean a long while, decades. It routes information, it filters noise, keeps the system running. But the big difference is that now it's got a user interface. Now we can talk to it and not just through it. And this is a very important sort of tipping point. Because I think the reason AI feels so threatening is because it feels very human. We've personified AI in the last 3 years 100 or even 1,000 times more than we did 80 years ago. It was never a chatbot. It was never this almost semi-sentient being or presence on our computers that we could get to build a recipe or plan a holiday or help us learn a new language. And that tipping point was really when AI went public. So around 2020, 2021, that's when something really shifted. GPT-3 came out, and that was really the first time a model could generate human-sounding text at scale. And in 2022 was when OpenAI released this ChatGPT in its sort of early phase or first form. And suddenly it was like your aunt, your boss, your dentist, everyone was using AI. I remember when DALL-E first came out, we were running AI generating art events in Cape Town and getting people to participate in that. And it was this absolute, it was almost dissociative how insane the technology was. But I mean, needless to say, it had over 100 million users in over 2 months, which is the fastest adoption of any tech product ever. And you may have already heard that. But then add DALL-E and Midjourney and Stable Diffusion in the same period, and AI went from this background process to a creative collaborator. I think that's when the general public realized the potential and the power within AI. And before that, really, it was engineers training models. But after that, it was everyone writing prompts, and that's when this public imagination shifted from AI as automation to AI as identity. And now, every major app you use integrates AI. It's sort of a do or die at this point. A lot of the biggest tech thinkers have posited that already to some degree. And I think any app or any business that isn't integrating AI will slowly become irrelevant. Google Search has rebuilt itself around generative summaries. Microsoft has Copilot baked into the Office suite. Things like Photoshop and Notion and Figma and Canva, they've all launched AI perks and bonuses to their user interface and to their apps. And we're really in this like AI everywhere economy now, where it's not just one industry, but all of them. And I found this thing by McKinsey's 2024 State of AI report, and it found that adoption doubled between 22 and 24, especially in marketing, software dev, and operations. So we're past this question of if AI changes work. It has, and it will, and it did. I think the question we should be really focusing on is how much control do we have over the shape it takes? And I think that's the biggest black box at the moment. And it's largely because of the threats. The obvious one are bad actors with bad intentions, right? AI lowers the cost of manipulation. Things like deepfakes and fake news, phishing emails that sound human. And it's not an unknown, right? It's not that people have this blind spot. Things like reports on malicious use, and I mean, OpenAI and Anthropic have done those already. They've included AI-generated scams and extortion emails written by chatbots. Google's threat analysis group also reported hundreds of attempts by state actors to use generative AI for misinformation campaigns. And the small stuff as well, like micro-targeted ads. But the less obvious one is over-trust. And this is something that we can control directly. Right, we assume AI knows because it sounds confident. I've had this experience multiple times where it's spat something out, and it's only when I know that it's wrong that I look a little bit deeper, and then it comes up with like, oh yeah, that was a mistake, here's the right one. But it's dangerous when I don't know, because then I don't question. So when it gives us wrong information, we often believe it, because it's wrapped in this authority. And if every industry starts outsourcing that decision-making, right, who's responsible when the machine is wrong, I mean, that's a question mark. And the deeper threat above all of this, or underneath all of this, is concentration of power. And global monopolies are no new idea. I'm a big, protester. I'm in opposition to anyone having a monopoly on anything. I don't think it does the world any good. But when it comes to owning the biggest models, AI models, the computing power, the data, even if AI doesn't destroy humanity, it's very, very possible that it consolidates control over humanity. And I think that's the risk, because humans are a lot more unpredictable. And I think the only thing more dangerous dangerous an AI is a human using AI. But there is opportunity, of course, and this really does excite me, over and above all the threats. The three big ones are efficiency, creativity, and access. This has really exploded the access to creative output on any level, right? AI can automate the boring stuff, which frees up time and totally levels the playing field. Small businesses can have marketing tools that were once reserved for big agencies or big companies. As a designer, I can prototype faster. I write a little bit, but writers who do it full time, they can brainstorm ideas. They have an editor on hand 24/7, and just the accessibility of things like real-time translation, captioning, screen reading. It's absolute game changers for inclusion. And there's scientific breakthroughs too. I mean, protein folding has been a massive focus for AI development, drug discovery, material science. It's just able to work at a speed that we cannot achieve. And I don't think it necessarily takes credit away from humans, especially if it does the 80% of the grunt work in 20% of the time. It really frees up the human brain to do the higher order thinking. So basically, I see AI as a power tool and nothing more than that. It's dangerous if it's used by the wrong people, but it's incredible if it's handled with intention and empathy and humanity. Then there's the human tension, which I don't want to get too deep into because I find it quite confusing, and politics is not really an exciting topic to get into on a 20-minute podcast. But regulation, trust, and literacy, I think, are big topics in this area as well that I'm quite interested and quite excited to see where it goes. I think the biggest one is that regulators are scrambling. There was an EU AI Act that was passed in 2024, and it categorizes risk levels from minimal, things like spam filters, to unacceptable, like social scoring. Social scoring being sort of like ranking people based on demographic things and that kind of thing. And the US and China are drafting frameworks, but the speed of innovation in AI just keeps running the law, which is, I think, something we're not going to catch up with, and it's going to be an interesting struggle to sort of keep regulation up with AI development. But I think the real solution might not be regulating or regulation alone. I truly believe it's in literacy. So knowing how AI works, when to question it, how to spot when you're being manipulated. I think the future might depend less on banning AI and more on teaching people how to coexist with it responsibly. The best example I can think of for this is when schools wanted to ban AI because kids were using it to write essays. And I think locking the next generation out of a relationship with AI puts them at a huge disadvantage when they leave school. I really think the best approach would be to integrate AI etiquette. And I mean, schools is a more complicated example because I think the grading system, the way we grade or assess a child's intellectual ability, is completely wrong. We essentially score them on short-term memory as opposed to understanding and comprehension. And there are, tests and questions that try to work around this, but I think fundamentally, AI does give an opportunity if we're willing to use it, where kids can write their essays using AI, but what they get marked on is how many questions they asked in their prompt or in their prompting. How long was their conversation? And then in their presentation of those materials, they can do an oral critique on what AI created and maybe add their own addendum to it on some level. And I think scoring the next generation on that level already is more valuable. So in a way, it's kind of like a new digital hygiene that we need to learn, like learning to wash your hands after the social media pandemic. And I think if we look at where it's going, So if we turn our eyes to the future now, AI is going to get and has been getting more agentic. So systems that don't just respond, but they act on goals. Think email assistants that negotiate. They shop, they book, they reply autonomously. It's helpful, yes, but it's messy, right? Because who's the person that they're modeling their intent off of, right? Who do they actually serve? That's a big question I have, and I don't have the answer. The bottlenecks really now are energy, which is computing power, and data, not imagination. I think I heard training ChatGPT 4 reportedly used something like enough power to generate or power 60,000 homes for a year, which is really the next hidden cost, because I think the environment is more important than AI, but AI could really help solve our environmental crises, but AI itself is at the moment a detriment to the environment. So I think the future of AI is really less about replacement and more about dependence. It's not going to take our jobs overnight, but it will make them unrecognizable. And I think that, along with the dependence point, are probably the two most important things I'm focusing on, and I would urge whoever's listening to this to focus on as well. Becoming dependent on AI is a really dangerous road to go down. I think if used correctly, it can speed up processes, but you need to make sure you are using your intellectual capacity alongside it. If it starts removing the thinking from everything you do, you end up setting yourself or pushing yourself into a corner where AI is the only way out. And if AI becomes our overlords, then maybe that's not such a bad place to be in. But until then, it really makes you a speaker for AI as opposed to anything else. And that sort of leads on to the next point of our jobs won't disappear, they just will change. Because I think before we get replaced by AI, I think people using AI will replace people not using AI. I personally am very intentional about where I use AI and where I don't. And the biggest sort of criteria for me is to employ AI in jobs that don't require a lot of higher order thinking, but that AI can do a lot faster than I can. So essentially, the equation is if AI can save me 2 hours that I can reinvest into the deeper or higher thinking, then it's a no-brainer for me. So will AI be our downfall? Probably not in the apocalyptic sense, or I hope not. There's no rogue consciousness or iRobot kind of scenario, but it could quietly erode things in society. Our trust, what is true, our autonomy, our creative originality. But I really think it's only if we let it. I think we forget how much control we really have. So then the question isn't whether AI becomes more human, it's whether we become less human by using it. So maybe the real challenge for all of us is, rather than keep up with AI, keep up with our humanity. Make it interesting enough that it's not worth outsourcing, or that it's not worth replicating into some AI consciousness.